In this piece, 3 of us are playing written music, but one of us is actually just making stuff up, improvising.
We're trying to figure out which of us is the improviser while we are playing, and they are trying to avoid getting caught.
How do we tell who the improviser is?
Maybe something we can hear about their playing.
Or is it a physical tell? The way they are looking at their page or moving their body?
Looks like I have an idea of who it might be, so I'm gonna make a call. I stop the music and say the name of who I think the improviser is. At the beginning of the piece, we made up musical names for ourselves, and I'll use that name to call Dominic out.
Then I respond.
And it looks like I got it right. Dominic was the improviser. I get a point.
Now, we're tallying up our points so that both us and the audience can keep track of how we're doing in the game.
Wait, this is a game?
It certainly seems like it, but it's also a piece of music. We are communicating entirely using music, and we're playing it in a concert in front of an audience.
These are Ludic Pieces.
Hi everyone, we are Away from Keyboard, or AFK, a contemporary chamber music collective that focuses specifically on interactive performances and musical games. Over the course of 2024 to 25, we've put on 2 concerts in New York City where we have designed and performed new Ludic pieces. We've commissioned 2 composers and done multiple educational workshops with various music programs and schools around the city.
In this video, we're going to talk about Ludic Pieces, what they are, and what our process is for making and performing them, and why we think they are a fascinating new approach to live interactive music making and community building.
Ludic pieces are pieces of music that incorporate play structures or game mechanics into their composition or performance. I coined the term ludic piece in my doctoral dissertation, and it comes from the Latin word ludus, which means play, as well as ludology, the field of study of play and games, which I drew from to analyze and understand these pieces.
The piece we were playing at the start of the video, I'm actually just making stuff up, is a ludic piece because it incorporates the game mechanic of guessing who the improviser is and calling them out. It's essentially a strategy game about reading people, avoiding suspicion, and the difference between improvisation and composition that happens to play out in the form of a piece of music.
As an ensemble, we've played a lot of Ludic pieces, including
A game where we add rhythms to an interlocking grid, like Tetris pieces.
a game about adding and removing notes that we can play in order to pull the music to our key, maximizing our score.
A game where we pass bells around a circle and have to react when it changes direction.
And many more that we will cover later in the video.
Basically, all of these pieces require us as performers to be the players of the game, in that we are interacting with a set of rules and making strategic choices.
Ludic pieces also often incorporate elements of theatrical performance, technology, speaking, and sometimes even audience participation.
So, why are we combining games and music?
Well, there's a long history of connection between the two. It's also significant that we use the same word play to refer to both playing games and playing music.
Early examples of game mechanics in music include dice games by Mozart, used to randomly choose measures of music to combine into a short piano piece.
A lot of the modern approach to Ludic pieces can be traced back to movements surrounding indeterminacy in the mid-20th century experimental music scenes in America and Europe. Composers such as John Cage, Karlheinz Stockhausen, and Lukas Foss experimented with relinquishing control of aspects of their music, both to chance and to the performer, giving them agency over parameters like which order to play notes or even pages in. It's not hard to start to see these rule sets for player choices as games.
Another factor influencing the creation of ludic pieces is music's place within games, something that has been transformed in the last 50 years through the medium of video games. Some genres of games, rhythm games in particular, create a set of mechanics that force the player to engage with the music in order to succeed at the game. I've made tracks for a game mod that focuses on interacting with the music, synchronizing your movements with mechanics timed to a polyrhythmic pulse. These are, in a very real sense, musical games.
Both of these influences, musical pieces with indeterminate or player-chosen elements, and games with musical mechanics, combine to create what we understand today as ludic pieces. There are a lot of different kinds of ludic pieces, but we can classify them in many of the same ways that we classify board games or video games. They could be competitive or collaborative.
Both of the new pieces that we commissioned this year were collaborative games. Wishbowl by Kareth Livengood is a game where we searched for lit tokens hidden throughout the stage. These tokens contained wishes that we wrote down beforehand. When we found a wish, we read it and dropped it into the central wishbowl.
I wish to pet a cat every day on my way to work.
Eventually filling the wishbowl with lights representing our collective wishes.
The microphone won't feedback with the speakers.
Build a World by Sophia Dou sets up a collaborative musical relationships between us using worlds of sound, 3 distinct soundscapes that we inhabit and move between, assigning soloists, imitators, and accompanists to create different combinations of these worlds. We've also played other collaborative games, including a musical twister game written for us in a New York Youth Symphony workshop, where we spun a wheel to gradually build melodies that we would play together.
The competitive games that we've played can also be divided into several groups based on what their mechanics are about. We've played games about achieving musical tasks, like staying in time while passing a pulse around the circle, or bringing the music into your own key and away from everyone else's keys. We've played games about communicating information musically, including games about dictating the melodies that we make up for each other, or games about recognizing and imitating each other's musical names, or games about using a musical hints language to communicate information so that we can guess a melody without even hearing it.
We've also designed and played games that use turn-based strategies such as Core Tetris, designed by me. In this game, teams take turns adding rhythms to a grid, trying to interlock them like Tetris pieces. When you complete a beat, you get points, so you're incentivized to make the rhythms fit together smoothly. As more and more rhythms get added, the texture turns into a continuous stream of interlocking notes between the two teams.
We've also designed games that include audience participation, which we'll talk more about later in this video.
So, how do you design a ludic piece? Well, once you decide what type of game it's going to be, competitive or cooperative, how many players, etc., a strategy that we like to use is to find an existing game or mechanic to base it off of, such as Tetris, Hot and Cold, Hide and Seek, Rock, Paper, Scissors, or Tic-Tac-Toe. We made a piece that started off as a musical version of Tic-Tac-Toe, so to demonstrate, let's use Tic-Tac-Toe to see how we might transform it into a piece of music. Tic-Tac-Toe is a turn-based game for 2 players in which they fill in a 3x3 grid with X's and O's, trying to complete 3 in a row, column, or diagonal. For our first attempt, let's just keep the game the exact same, but assign each square of the board a musical value, like let's say a note. Maybe you would play that note when you claim that square for your team. But we're just adding random notes on top of a non-musical game. Is there a way we can make the game feel more fundamentally musical? Okay, for our second attempt, what if we tried to make each row, column, or diagonal have a specific combination of notes, like a triad? This is interesting because now the act of winning, completing a row, column, or diagonal, has a direct musical consequence. We hear a triad, and thus creating this musical sound is our goal when playing the game. Unfortunately, space doesn't work like this. It's not actually possible to have a triad or even any specific pitch collection across every row, column, or diagonal while having each square be a unique note. Maybe our approach is getting too constrained by tic-tac-toe's tiny 3x3 grid. For our third attempt, let's get rid of the grid. Instead of thinking in terms of physical space, what if we build our triads purely within the realm of musical space? Each space that we take for our team is now not a spot in a grid, but just a specific note. We each take turns taking notes, and our goal now is to create any major or minor triad. This allows us to easily sonify the state of the game. We just have to play the notes currently owned by each team, perhaps giving each team their own instrument. This means that when a player wins by completing a triad, we hear that musically. There is a powerful correlation between the state of the game and the resulting sounds we are hearing. However, now that our space has opened from a grid to this more purely musical landscape of pitches, we discover another problem. It's not possible to stop someone from winning instantly.
Let's say I take C.
I try to stop them from getting C major or minor by taking G.
I see that the C chords are now blocked off, so I take F, hoping for F major or F minor.
I can only stop one of them by choosing A flat or A. I choose A.
Therefore, I can always complete a triad no matter what they chose.
Therefore, what if we made it a points-based game? Instead of simply ending the game once one person completes a triad, what if you earn a point when completing a triad and then return those notes back to the middle so the other team can then use them? Now, the game can continue on as long as we want. Also, this presents another interesting strategic dilemma. If I just completed C major, I have to sacrifice all three of those notes back to the middle. So if I wanted to complete E minor, in addition to getting a B, I would have to re-obtain E and G. What if instead I got C, then E, and then B, and only then got G? I would be able to complete 2 triads at once. That seems harder to do and strategically interesting, so what if we incentivize that with a combo system where you get a point multiplier for completing multiple triads at once? What strategies will people use? An interesting thing is that with all of these new mechanics, we drift further away from the original premise of tic-tac-toe. However, we could consider that a good thing. We've taken our initial premise and expanded it into a game that is hopefully both strategically and musically compelling. So, what does it sound like? Here's an excerpt from our performance. It has a specific musical texture, but basically all of the material is improvised, based on the notes that are part of the game. There aren't any pre-existing melodies or material of any kind, really. So is this really a piece of music? If we listen to just the audio, what does it sound like? Is it something that you would want to listen to on its own? Is it a game first, or a piece of music first?
We found that ludic pieces often fall in different places on the game to piece spectrum. We think that this is an important distinction because there is a fundamental difference in function and audience. A piece of music is thought to be a usually fixed experience presented by musicians for audience members, while a game is usually an experience primarily for the players of said game, though we do love to watch people play games.
So, how do we tell the difference?
Since pieces of music are usually fixed experiences for an audience, they generally have a narrative of some kind. Even if that narrative is non-specific, we understand a certain sense of progression. To take a very famous example, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony begins in one place, and through a process of musical development, ends in a very different place. There are entire modes of musical analysis built off of this assumption of progression.
But in the game, the only thing established beforehand are the rules. The actual events of the narrative happen differently each time based on the player's actions.
Of course, this distinction is blurry too. Consider video game stories. Many of them have clear pre-fixed narrative structure, even if they branch or are impacted by player decisions.
We can come up with some clarifying questions to ask of our ludic piece to decide where it falls on this line between game and piece, such as, does it have its own musical identity or material, melodies, rhythms, textures, specific gestures? Is this material predetermined beforehand or constructed in the moment based on the actions of the players?
Determining where on the spectrum our ludic piece falls is important because it might determine what sort of occasion or venue is best for it. Is this piece for a live concert or an informal community game night? Is it a game that can be spectated by a passive audience, or should we find a way for the audience to participate in the game?
A lot of the ludic pieces that we've designed as a group involve elements of audience participation. Since these works already blur the line between who is a player of music and who is the audience of a game, why not try to incorporate the audience as players as well?
So, what are the different ways we can bring the audience into the game?
One way is to have them make collective decisions. In my piece, Decisions Are Hard, we poll the audience to make choices by raising their hands, setting up and deconstructing choose-your-own-adventure stories.
Raise your hand if you prefer. And raise your hand if you prefer. Okay, definitely the second one.
In I'm Actually Just Making Stuff Up, we implemented a way for the audience to participate in the game by guessing themselves who the improviser was using their phones, which would audibly tell them at the end of the round if they were right or not.
The audience can also participate via individual volunteers that become performers. In the dictation game by Isaac Thomas, we got 5 volunteers from the audience to try to copy our melodies with us on the piano as players themselves.
The audience can also make sounds along with the performance. There's a long tradition of audiences clapping and singing along to sounds they like. Some artists like Jacob Collier have invented systems of gestures that let them control the audience like a choir in real time, playing them like a giant instrument.
We could also set up systems of control where the audience can play us. We collaborated with creative coder and composer Brian Ellis to design Draw Jam, an interactive system where audience members could draw on their phones and it would show up on screen, where we would interpret what they were drawing live as if it was a graphic score.
We also designed an activity called See You on the Other Side, where we demonstrated various physical gestures that the audience could use to control us, such as bringing us higher or lower in pitch, or assigning various gestures to specific audience members who could cue us to have us play that gesture. We then let individual audience members control us as they tried to achieve a bunch of musically interesting tasks on a bingo card. All of these scenarios give the audience members varying levels of creative control, which I think is really powerful, since it's not often that we are encouraged to engage with music creatively if we're not trained in it. As we have designed and performed a lot of different ludic pieces, we found that the combination of play and music opens up the possibility for synthesizing a lot of different modes of community interaction. From watching artistic events such as concerts, movies, plays, etc., to watching people play games in sports stadiums, board game nights, or on video game live streams, these events create a powerful space to bring people together and form a community. I think that synthesizing these kinds of events through musical games and interactive performance has a lot of potential to be an exciting new mode of artistic expression.
We live in a world where most people engage with music primarily through recording, and the majority of music is constructed for the purposes of recorded media. What is the role of live music today? There are a lot of different answers one could give to that, but we hope that our interactive performance paradigm helps create a collaborative, community-enriching space that is unique to live musical performance, drawing from the concert hall and the game night to build a new kind of experience.
We are not the only group that is exploring these kinds of new communal experiences. Groups like the Brooklyn Motion Capture Dance Ensemble have been creating new audience-focused creative interactive performances, and online groups like the Musical Games Wiki have started cataloging ludic works so that more people can try them out and share them with their friends and start making musical games together.
We hope that, having seen our work, you might be interested in trying out these interactive experiences and maybe even designing some ludic pieces of your own. We are always excited to try out new musical games, so feel free to get in touch. You can find our performances of all of the pieces mentioned in this video on our website, ruafk.com. Thanks for watching!